All right, Tetyana, I think we'll make a start. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our latest webinar. My name is Jasmine Diamantaris. I am an accredited practicing dietitian from the Olive Wellness Institute. I'll be your host for today, and we are joined with Dr. Tetyana Rox from the Food and Mood Academy to discuss how nutrition can support brain health. So before we get started, I'll just go over a little bit of housekeeping. So today, as you'll notice when you join the webinar, we'll be recording it and we'll be uploading it to our website and also emailing you all a copy of the recording as well. So if you miss anything or want to review something or send it to a colleague, that'll be there for you to review. The structure for today is going to be a 30-minute presentation from Dr. Tetyana Rox and then about 15 minutes for a Q&A and discussion section. And so you'll notice on your screen there's a Q&A section, so please pop your questions in that during the presentation and don't use the chat box. And lastly, just a bit about the Olive Wellness Institute. For those who are joining us for the first time, we are a research repository for all olive-based health science. So given its clinical relevance, we focus quite a bit on extra virgin olive oil, and we are primarily funded by Hort Innovation and deliver CPD opportunities like this one for free. And that brings us to today's topic. So, as all of you know, mental and neurological disorders have become a leading cause of disability globally. And with that, there has become a growing need for preventative lifestyle strategies to better support our brains as we age. So today we have partnered with the Food and Mood Academy to discuss how we can better prescribe and utilize these foods to support brain health. Over the next 30 minutes, you'll be hearing from Dr. Tetyana Rox, who is an expert on nutritional psychiatry, an accredited practicing dietitian, senior research fellow, and director at the Food and Mood Academy. At the Academy, she leads the translation of nutritional psychiatry research into clinical and population level practice. And because of this, she's regularly invited to speak at academic, professional, and community events in Australia and overseas. She has developed the world's first free online course in the field, reaching over 49,000 people globally, and she's been recognised for her leadership in culturally appropriate, evidence-based nutrition and mental health education. We are very excited to hear from you today, Tetyana, and whenever you're ready, I'll stop sharing my screen and we can get started.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for such a warm and wonderful introduction, Jasmine. I'm really much looking forward to spend next few minutes here with you. Good morning, good afternoon. I was keep reminding myself to say good afternoon, not good morning. I'm joining you from Europe, from London, so to me it is early morning, but thank you everyone for joining us today. So we will be exploring relationship between food, extra virgin olive oil, dietary patterns, and brain health across the lifespan. So this not going to be a presentation about olive oil as a magic bullet or standalone intervention. What we will do is examine some of the evidence for extra virgin olive oil within Mediterranean style dietary patterns and discuss how these dietary approaches might support both mental and cognitive health. As dietitians, nutritionists, or healthcare professionals, we increasingly ask to support people with mood, with well-being, with cognitive performance, and concerns about healthy aging altogether. So we know that professional bodies also increasingly recommending, and they could not do that too soon, they increasingly recommending diet and other lifestyle interventions as foundational, non-negotiable in treatment of many brain and mood-related disorders. So this is particularly relevant because we know that many biological pathways implicated in depression, in cognitive decline, and dementia overlap with pathways influenced by nutrition. This is why we're talking about that today. So what I will try to do today is to review some emerging brain health frameworks, evidence from nutritional psychiatry, talk about what makes extra virgin olive oil so unique, and also discuss some human evidence linking olive oil to brain health. Hopefully, we're going to have some time for questions, discussions, and reflection on what we went through today. Jasmine did introduce us, but I just want to mention two words about our wonderful Food and Mood Center and Food and Mood Academy. So, Food and Mood Center is a world leading, pioneering center exploring research in nutritional psychiatry. So, its area of research, practice, and policy, which links diet to mental and brain conditions across the lifespan. However, we all know that evidence is only useful when it's actually used in practice. And this is why I establish and lead the Food and Mood Academy. And our sole role is to actually bring evidence to life through accessible and foundational, basically, education for absolutely everyone. So if you're not our friend just yet, I really hope that you will join our social media or become part of our newsletter. We inform you about latest research in nutritional psychiatry as it come to life. Okay, so let's move to today's topic. Currently, as Jasmine mentioned, despite growing awareness of brain and cognitive well being, mental disorders remain among the leading causes of disability worldwide. While dementia is actually one of the leading causes of disability, dependency, and mortality in older adults. These conditions have traditionally been studied and treated separately, but now growing evidence actually showing us that they share several underlying mechanisms, biological mechanisms. And research has identified common pathways, including chronic neuroinflammation or inflammation, neuroinflammation, oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, impaired insulin signaling, and alteration, and of course in gut brain axis. So these processes can really disrupt neuronal communication, synapses function, and brain network integrity across all lifespan. Many of the same modifiable risk factors are linked with both poor mental health outcomes and increased risk of cognitive decline or dementia. This includes cardiometabolic disease, hypertension, very importantly, obesity, physical inactivity, poor sleep, smoking, and of course, dietary quality. Diet is particularly relevant, well, because most of us are dietitians and nutritionists, but also because it influences multiple pathways implicated in brain disorders. We understand that nutritional factors can actually really affect inflammatory signaling, oxidative stress, glucose metabolism, vascular function, many other aspects of our bodies, which we'll discuss today. And they really, because of this, they essentially can interact with central nervous system. And this expanding evidence base positions dietitians and nutritionists and any other health professionals working with diet as a critical workforce in brain health prevention strategies with potential to really influence outcomes ranging from mental well-being to cognitive aging and dementia risk. That's, I think, pretty important. In the recent years, advances in neuroscience have really shifted our understanding of brain health from disease-specific model to a life course framework. Brain function is shaped by continuous biological processes beginning before birth and really extending into older age. So from here all the way to older age, including neurodevelopment, synapses pruning, myelation, neuroplasticity, and age-related neuronal loss. This perspective, this whole life view really highlights that factors influencing brain health early in life might have consequences decades later. For example, prenatal and childhood nutrition can really affect neurodevelopmental processes such as neuronal differentiation, synapse formation, and in midlife, vascular and metabolic health, really, really important. They are among the strongest predictors of later life cognitive decline. One of the strongest evidence now linking that particularly metabolic health to cognitive decline. We understand that or see from several large population studies that up to 45% of dementia cases might be attributed to potentially modifiable risk factors across the lifespan. And many of these factors exert their effect through cumulative impact on brain structure and function, including different damage, chronic inflammation, metabolic dysfunction, and reduce cognitive reserve. And this is very important because, our population, global population, is really aging. By 2050, approximately 1 in 6 people globally will be over the age of 65. Just think about implications. So it's really substantially going to increase the burden of age-related cognitive disorders. And among all modifiable exposures, diet is quite unique because it can influence brain health at every stage of life. We eat all the time. So nutrients and dietary patterns really impact various aspects of brain formation and then brain health through life. And as a result, nutrition is really recognized as one of the key determinants of brain health from early development through to healthy cognitive aging. Many conditions affecting our mental and brain health share common biological and environmental mechanisms. And it's important to mention this because they are basically determinant of our mental and brain health. And these factors interact across the lifespan to share the brain development, function, resilience, and aging. Some of these mechanisms are genetics as genes basically and gene environment interactions. This is something very, very complicated and not readily modifiable. Epigenetic changes that influence gene expression, chronic stress, HPA axis dysregulation, chronic low-grade inflammation, oxidative stress, insulin resistance, and metabolic dysfunction along with gut microbiome and gut-brain axis signaling. We, of course, have environmental exposures, including air pollution and social determinants of health. Together, these mechanisms influence every aspect of our brain health, from development to neuroplasticity, neurotransmission, and cognitive reserves. This is it's important to remember about that as well. And it's really this shared biology helps us to explain why many of the same risk factors, such as poor diet or physical inactivity, really link with both mental disorders and cognitive decline. It also really shows us the potential for prevention strategies that target common upstream drivers of brain health across our lives. More recently, research has also highlighted roles for different metabolic factors happening in our body, neuroimmune signaling, mitochondrial function, or rather mitochondrial dysfunction. And rather than acting through single pathway, dietary patterns influence many of these symptoms or systems, simultaneously, because also they all work through gut-brain axis, really, when you think about it. And this is one reason nutrition has become so important area of interest with both of conditions, brain and mental health conditions. From brain health perspective, what we need to remember that diet can be viewed as helping to shape the biological environment in which our brain functions through life. I'm coming to you from the field of nutritional psychiatry, so couple of words here. The field has grown substantially over the last decade. We know that early evidence came preliminary from observational studies, with systematic reviews consistently showing us that higher diet quality is linked with a lower risk of depression, while poor quality is linking pretty strongly to increased risk of various mental health conditions, but depression in particular. Among the dietary patterns, Mediterranean style diet have emerged as one of the most consistently linked with better mental health outcomes. But the field now progressed beyond observational evidence to include randomized controlled trials, which also demonstrate that dietary improvements can actually treat depression. For example, landmark SMILES trial. I'm not going to go through that one. If you're not familiar with the SMILES trial, we present a lot of information about that on our site and Academy's website as well. Basically, it was the first randomized controlled trial that showed that change in diet can actually treat depressive symptoms. But since SMILES trial, we had other at least 5 randomized controlled trials showing the same outcome: significant reduction in depressive symptoms following Mediterranean style dietary intervention. And collectively, these findings support diet as modifiable factor in mental health. Remember, we reviewed some of the factors which basically predetermine our brain and mental health. Many of them are non-modifiable. Diet is modifiable. So if dietary pattern can influence mental health outcomes, could they also affect the biological mechanisms that drive cognitive decline and neurodegenerative disorders? Well, they really do, because we see that one reason Mediterranean style diets have attracted so much attention, it's the potential to influence several biological pathways implicated in both mental disorders and cognitive decline, which I have mentioned in the previous earlier slides. Particularly, anti-inflammatory dietary patterns such as Mediterranean diet seem to influence oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, insulin resistance, vascular dysfunction, and gut microbiome composition, which is very exciting, really. When we talk about anti-inflammatory dietary patterns, we of course are typically referring to dietary patterns characterized by high intake of vegetables, fruit, legumes, whole grains, nuts and seeds, seafood, extra virgin olive oil, with lower intakes of highly processed foods, refined carbohydrates, and saturated and animal-based fats. We also know that MIND, Mediterranean DASH intervention for neurodegenerative delay diet, builds on these principles and was specifically designed to support cognitive health and healthy brain aging. It places greater emphasis, along with basic principles, on Mediterranean diet. Mind really places greater emphasis on food linked with neuroprotection, particularly leafy green vegetables, berries, and extra virgin olive oil, and of course, low salt. We know from systematic reviews that greater adherence to MIND diet is linked with better cognitive function, greater cognitive reserve, and lower risk for cognitive decline. We also see from emerging evidence that these dietary patterns might help reduce neuroinflammation and influence accumulation of beta amyloid and tau proteins, those two key pathological features of Alzheimer's disease. What we need to know here is that these benefits are unlikely to be explained by any single nutrients. In nutritional psychiatry, we tend to look at dietary patterns. So current evidence really support dietary pattern approach, where combined effects of absolutely multiple foods, bioactive compounds, work together to support brain and metabolic health across our life. Evidence linking dietary patterns to cognitive outcomes also quite substantial. We see from many systematic reviews and meta-analysis that great adherence to Mediterranean style diet is linked with better cognitive performance, slow rates of cognitive decline, low risk of mild cognitive impairment, and low risk of dementia. Of course, the effects observed at individual level are often quite modest. We need to remember that. But even small delays in cognitive decline could translate into substantial public health benefits given the growing global burden of dementia and also growing age of our world. Remember, 1 in 6 by 2050 going to be the age of over 65. What we also see, particularly from observational studies, that this consistency of findings across both mental health and cognitive health, particularly when it's come to Mediterranean style diet. And it has led researchers to investigate which component, although we look at Mediterranean diet as a pattern, we did look at specific components that might be particularly important for brain health. And one of the most studied and arguably defining component of Mediterranean diet is extra virgin olive oil. So extra virgin olive oil is much more than source of dietary fat. Within traditional Mediterranean populations, it serves as primary culinary fat and often replaces sources of saturated fat such as butter. From nutritional perspective, extra virgin olive oil provides predominantly monounsaturated fatty acids, particularly oleic acid, vitamin E, and diverse range of polyphenolic compounds. And these polyphenols, also referred more recently as biophenols, distinguish extra virgin olive oil from refined olive oil or other refined oils and many other fats. Because of these specific compounds, extra virgin olive oil has attracted significant scientific interest in relation to cardiovascular, to metabolic, and of course to brain health. The key components of interest in extra virgin olive oil include polyphenols such as English is my third language, and sometimes I can't say the word in one go. So, second go now. Hydroxytyrosol, of course, tyrosol and oleocanthal. So, this only found in olive oil, particularly the last one. So these compounds possess antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties and might influence multiple pathways relevant to brain health. We see from experimental, so preclinical, pre-human studies that polyphenols might reduce oxidative stress, improve endothelial function, reduce neuroinflammatory signaling, and also influence this amyloid beta metabolism, which really support our vascular health. Mechanistically, extra virgin olive oil polyphenols can also reduce reactive oxygen species and enhance many antioxidant defenses, helping to maintain neuronal and vascular function. We also understand that some of the polyphenols been shown to modulate inflammatory pathways and promote this amyloid beta clearance, providing a potential biological basis for observed association between extra virgin olive consumption and cognitive health. And that's where discussions around olive oil and brain health become particularly interesting. As I mentioned in previous slide, oleocanthal has attracted attention because it appears to exert anti-inflammatory effects through pathways similar to basically oxidative inhibition. In experimental Alzheimer's models, so in basically animal models with Alzheimer's disorder, it also has been shown to enhance clearance of amyloid beta proteins. Hydroxytyrosol, meanwhile, is one of the most potent antioxidant compounds identified in food, and it's mostly come from extra virgin olive oil and wine, but we don't talk about wine right now. And it appears capable of reducing oxidative stress and supporting cellular resilience as well. The key point for dietitians, nutritionists here is that these compounds provide biological plausibility for epidemiological evidence we see and observe. What we need to be careful is not to overstate the evidence. Most of this work comes from cell structures or cell studies and animal models, and thus really does not provide just yet the proof that isolated polyphenols improve cognition in humans. We understand the strong signal, but there's no studies in humans per se with specific isolated polyphenols or biophenols. Another emerging area of interest is the interaction between extra virgin olive oil and gut microbiome. Human studies here suggest that extra virgin olive oil might promote greater abundance of several beneficial microbial species. We understand that, of course, abundance of beneficial microbial species, that's what we need for better gut health, particularly lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. We understand that most olive oil polyphenols or biophenols escape digestion in the small intestine and reach the colon, where they are metabolized by resident microbiota, which actually use that as prebiotics. This creates two-way interaction that microbiota metabolize olive oil polyphenols while olive oil polyphenols influence microbial composition. And some studies really have also reported reduction in many inflammatory biomarkers which come together with consumption olive oil, CRPs specifically following dietary interventions rich in extra virgin olive oil. These findings remain preliminary. They definitely deserve some attention from us. Most compelling evidence for extra virgin olive oil comes from human dietary pattern studies. That's our best evidence. So all the mechanistic research I mentioned explain why these benefits might occur, but should not be really interpreted as proof of causality. We need to remember that. But looking closer to brain health outcomes, evidence from studies such as PREDIMED, we know the big PREDIMED study, shows us that Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil linked with improved cognitive outcomes. PREDIMED was, of course, large Spanish randomized controlled trial involving more than 7,000 adults with cardiovascular risks. That was main outcomes for them. Participants were randomized into Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil, med diet supplemented with mixed nuts, and low-fat controlled diet. And participants in the group with extra virgin olive oil receive approximately 1 liter of extra virgin olive oil per week, equivalent to around 4 tablespoons daily. The original trial really showed significant reduction in major cardiovascular events. Remember, that was primary outcome. But key for today's discussion, cognitive sub-studies which were run through the cohort also demonstrated significant benefits. Participants assigned to Mediterranean diet intervention generally showed much better cognitive performance and slower cognitive decline compared with controls. They also had number of different test scores much higher than controls, such as mini mental state examination, beta clock drawing test performance. It's all tests to assess brain health and cognitive decline. Better global cognitive function, lower likelihood of mild cognitive impairment. And although, as I keep repeating, these cognitive outcomes were secondary endpoints, the findings really support this concept that long-term dietary adherence to dietary patterns such as Mediterranean diet with extra virgin olive oil might really contribute to healthier cognitive aging. More recently, prospective cohort evidence has really supported the case for olive oil consumption in particular. A very large analysis from the Nurses' Health Study and health professionals follow-up. It's pretty massive, one of the largest study we have, prospective study we currently have, followed more than 92,000 adults for almost 3 decades. So think about that, over 90,000 adults over 30 years. And what it showed that individuals consuming more than 7 grams of olive oil daily, so just 7 grams, approximately half of tablespoon, had 28% lower risk of dementia-related mortality compared with those who rarely consume olive oil. It's pretty significant signal, I'd say. Replacing margarine, mayonnaise, or any saturated fat-rich sauces with olive oil was linked with further reduction in dementia mortality risk. As always, observational studies cannot prove causation. I keep repeating that, but these findings are consistent with broader Mediterranean diet literature and really do show us that olive oil potentially beneficial component of healthy dietary patterns. Again, with research in diet, it's really challenging because human studies are expensive to conduct. They pretty difficult to set up because they do require a lot of resources. And humans, humans never eat what you ask them to eat. They never report what you ask them to eat or what they have eaten. So experimental studies are very hard to come by. This is why sometimes we have the biggest evidence from observational studies. But look, I mentioned majority of these studies involve a lot of people and been conducted for a long time. So signal, I would say, is pretty strong. When we look at mental health outcomes, we know we're all over it as well. So we see really pattern level association. Med diet patterns reaching extra virgin olive oil really linked to reduce risk of depression in observational studies, in intervention studies, and they show that although extra virgin olive oil is a feature of all the diets used in intervention, we really should not isolate extra virgin olive oil as sole active component. It should be viewed as consistent and important feature of dietary patterns linked to better mental health. From practical perspective, extra virgin olive oil remains the preferred choice. Compared with refined oil, extra virgin contains substantially higher concentration of polyphenol or biophenols, the ones we discuss, and really also undergoes minimal processing. But in general, polyphenol or biophenol content varies considerably between products. We need to remember that as well. And factors influencing content include olive variety, harvest timing, processing methods, storage conditions. I'm sure that Olive Oil Institute have a lot of information for you to review on these aspects of olive oil as well. What we do understand that bitterness and pepperiness often reflect higher polyphenol concentration. But storage, of course, always matters as well. Exposure to heat, oxygen, light can progressively reduce polyphenol content over time. one of the most important questions dietitians receive is how much olive oil should we really consume? Remember, most of the studies, 4 tablespoons per day. So varies from up to 4 tablespoons. So varies from 25 to 50, 60 milliliters daily. And this corresponds to, as I said, up to 4 tablespoons per day. The key message here is substitution rather than addition. The goal is not necessarily to increase total fat intake by adding extra virgin olive oil, but to replace less favorable fats, animal fat sources, with extra virgin olive oil. Practical application here, of course, cooking everything with extra virgin olive oil, using salad dressing, finishing dishes with extra virgin olive oil, replacing butter on toast, and really incorporating olive oil in your life as much as possible. In terms of cooking, I know we often get asked about cooking with extra virgin olive oil. We understand that it's generally considered pretty safe because most home cooking temperatures, such as sauteing or roasting or baking, stay within or near its practical cooking range. Olive oil, of course, contains high proportion of monounsaturated fats and natural antioxidants, and it's remain relatively stable during home cooking. We do understand that very high heat methods such as prolonged deep frying used more for industrial type of cooking can really degrade olive oil over time, but we don't use that at home. In practice, most important message again, it's about olive oil should be considered within context of dietary patterns. So rather than promoting single food, we should focus on helping our clients, patients to build sustainable Mediterranean style or anti-inflammatory eating patterns. Remember, it doesn't have to be Mediterranean. We can adjust to cultural background or preferences. It's about those beneficial components. Practical recommendations, so using extra virgin olive oil as prime culinary fat, replacing butter and other saturated fat sources, increasing plant food intake that cannot be underestimated, and incorporating legumes, nuts regularly, and of course reducing ultra-processed foods with high addition of sugar, salt, and animal fat. So we really need to think about culturally appropriate and achievable substitutions. And here to help us think a little bit, and for me to stop talking for a little bit, I want to offer you a quick case study. We can have a look at Brian, who's 55. He's been referred to us by GP. He's been increasingly stressed and all flat over the past year. He's got low energy, poor concentration. I'm pretty sure we all seen Brian's in our practice quite a few times. So have a look at about Brian. We're running out of time, so I would offer you to reflect on Brian and use this, particularly for some of us with less experience in practice. Think about what we actually gonna do with Brian. So what would we prioritize in first consultation in terms of, for example, use of Mediterranean style diet or extra virgin olive oil? Then think about if Brian being, for example, of Chinese origin, would we recommend Mediterranean diet or would we recommend extra virgin olive oil? Or should we think about other potential strategies to support their mental and brain health? I leave it as a reflective exercise for you to, should you wish to do after this webinar. I would like to conclude here with few take-home messages. We do understand that brain health is shaped across the lifespan by multiple modifiable factors, but diet is one of the key ones. And when I talk to people about diet, I really start to position that more and more as that biological environment which shapes so many processes in our body. We understand that Mediterranean style dietary patterns have the strongest, by far the strongest evidence base for supporting both mental and cognitive health. We understand that extra virgin olive oil is defining component of these dietary patterns and really provides lots of bioactive polyphenols, biophenols with plausible neuroprotective properties. Remember, majority of this evidence come from preclinical studies, but evidence from human studies, large prospective cohort studies, interventions also support inclusion of extra virgin olive oil within the dietary pattern, which links to better brain health outcomes. And again, dietary patterns, not individual ingredients or superfoods. So we understand that this really gives us a lot of variety and a lot of room to move when it's come to supporting our clients. Thank you very much for listening today. I do apologize. I went a little bit over time. It is 6:43 a.m. here in London, so I feel a little bit fragile for today. If you like to learn more, we offer a range of courses through our academy. We have Introduction to Nutritional Psychiatry, we have Lifestyle Medicine course, and of course we have our free open course, which many of you I know been recommending for clients and consumers because it really is quite foundational and accessible way to explore food and mood. We currently actually have over 95,000 global learners, so they will be in a good company. And if you'd like to connect with us, here are some of our addresses. Again, apology for running over time. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tetyana. That was fantastic and just so incredible to see the level of impact we can make with food and nutrition over time. It's such a fascinating area of research, and you did very good to cover as much as you did in the time we allotted. We'll get on to some of the questions that have been popping through whilst you've been presenting. The first one actually ties in really nicely with the questions you posed with the case study. But what are some of the key barriers you see in implementing the Mediterranean diet in Australia?
Look, we are so culturally diverse, which absolutely fantastic. That's my favorite, probably, feature of Australia. We come from different backgrounds, and through my work, I've been lucky to work with people I'm of Ukrainian heritage, with people in Ukraine, but also people in India, Brazil, Singapore, France, UK, America, Canada, anywhere. And what we understand that cultural adaptation is the best bet for us to reduce some of this or overcome some of these barriers, because one thing we need to remember, we can't underestimate how little, unfortunately, average consumer actually knows about diet and nutrition. It's absolutely fascinating that in a period when information is so freely available, there's so much confusion, there's so much misinformation. So sometimes when we, in a short consultation, we don't have time and we just maybe mention Mediterranean style diet, people sometimes get really confused. Like I've heard people saying, well, I don't like pizza and stuff like this when you mention Mediterranean diet. So unpacking the main factors, what we mean by saying Mediterranean style diet, maybe being slightly tricky and using anti-inflammatory diet instead can really help. So really focusing on reducing this lack of knowledge and skills, supporting people to develop a bit more self-efficacy around diet, bit more knowledge, bit more understanding.
Ah, fantastic. Our next question for you, Tetyana, is does 4 tablespoons of EVU per day cause weight gain?
Look, again, remember we talk about substitution, not just simple addition. Of
Mm.
course, if we add on, we add energy, and by everything we know about nutrition science, more energy in, we can potentially increase weight, of course. And but yes, so it's about substitution. We have not seen weight gain per se in many of the studies. Remember, sometimes we need to differentiate what we're trying to achieve here. So if we want to achieve weight loss together with improvement in cognitive, say, factors, remember that nurses study showed 7 grams of olive oil 28% reduction in dementia risk. So we probably don't need to start with 4 tablespoons with someone who also came to us with weight concern. We can start with low amount. But when you think about what you're substituting, energy in, energy out, probably going to be balanced if we remove all, say, animal fat, saturated fat from diet. 4 tablespoons become kind of okay. But of course, we need to adjust to individual goals.
That's great. And actually kind of addresses a comment someone else left in the Q&A section about how fantastic it is to hear like a bit of a range in how much EV we can be prescribing, because like as you said, even with like cultural relevance and different factors like that, it's really nice to have that almost kind of like spectrum of how we can support people with
It's
these
all
different foods.
It's a perfect comment, Jasmine, because it's
Mm.
always is. We need to remember, we know the science. We taught at universities for a number of years to kind of know what should be done. But unfortunately, in practice, it's always what can be done depending on individual, their needs, their preferences, and their values. And culturally, adaptation to olive oil can take time, and that's where sometimes I even say what supplement. As dietitians, we never go into supplements, but sometimes we might trial supplements again as something which would help people to, consume those beneficial biophenols we know could be quite helpful.
Fantastic. And I think just because of time, we might do one more question that we've had come through. And one second. This one's also about extra virgin olive oil. Someone was wondering whether we need to encourage patients to look for like high polyphenol extra virgin olive oil, or is any extra virgin olive oil suitable to support brain health?
In my understanding, there's no specific production rules or consumer protection laws which will show us content of polyphenols in extra virgin olive oil for all products. So what we do understand that some products are better than others. So extra virgin olive oil should be your priority. Then I can be cheeky. Look, I usually don't discriminate, but just think about if it's storage, if it's time, if it's production methods, probably something produced more locally will give you more advantages. But look, it's not always the case. Polyphenols, the really content of polyphenols and other active bioactive ingredients really depend on several components. And right now, we don't have them listed on our bottles of extra virgin olive oil. So go ahead, recommend extra virgin olive oil, non-refined olive oil. Or look, sometimes when I work with culturally diverse people, I talk about non-refined other oils, other like sunflower. In Ukraine, for example, it's sunflower oil. Less studied, still have a lot of bioactive compounds. So if it's extra virgin, if it's minimally processed, that's what we're looking for.
Thank you so much, Tetyana. And we cover similar kind of topics like this on our website as well, because it really is quite incredible that when certain producers get those processing methods right and those storage methods right, you can get an extra virgin olive oil that just is absolutely full with those beneficial compounds. I mean, not only for the brain health, but the flavor that it adds to your food as well is just out of this world. So I'm obviously a big advocate.
It just means sometimes people do need to, their palate need to adjust to, that
Mm.
beautiful flavor. I know that a lot of us absolutely love that bitterness, fruitiness, you call it whatever you want, but someone who, for example, used vegetable oil all
Mm.
their life might need time to adjust to the raw taste of olive oil, but also combination of olive oil in their favorite foods. And this is something to discuss too when we're recommending, for example, switching to extra virgin olive oil, that everything gonna taste better, but it might take some time.
Yes, absolutely. Allow the taste buds some time to adjust.
That's it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for presenting today, Tetyana. It was incredible to listen to, and those questions. It was wonderful to hear the discussion that we generated from that. If anyone else is interested, as Tetyana said, we have links to the Food and Mood Academy for you guys to look at their resources, and we'll also send out the links to our social media platforms and website. The Olive Wellness Institute has a lot of in-depth information about extra virgin olive oil production and the health science. So thank you all. I hope you had a lovely time, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, Jasmine. Bye, everyone.
Bye.